King of Cups.
Welcome everyone to the second installment of the Deep Drive-In on King of Cups. If you're not familiar with the Deep Drive-In, it is a segment that we do where we take two movies and put them under the same light. And each movie has similar themes and stories. And today is an even special one because, or specialer one, because we have returning guest Andy Crone, Cozy Crone, and this was really her idea. And it's kind of a celebration of her for her birthday, actually. So happy early birthday, Andy.
Thank you.
And we'll have some other fine ladies join us later on, but right now it's Andy and Jen.
Hello, Jen.
I think she might be frozen.
Uh-oh.
Oh yeah. Oh, she's back.
Oh, okay,
She's back.
Hey. Speaking of, I wonder if you just change your view on your screen, if that works. Like, the little view thing in the corner?
Yeah, I looked at that.
Even though...
It's on gallery, it's fine.
Okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
There she is.
So yeah, there we go.
Yay!
So yeah, we have Jenny here, and she'll be joining us. So welcome, Jen.
Thank you. Thank you, Kris. Hi, Andy.
Hello.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
We just didn't line this up this way, but of course tonight's roster is all ladies, and we just had Mother's Day, which is interesting. And when I walked in, I visited my grandparents for the holiday, and I told my grandma, I said, "Happy Mother's Day," and she goes, "Well, Happy Mother's Day to you too."
Huge.
Like, okay. Aw. And but yeah, I thought that was interesting that we are recording this all female spider conversation around right after Mother's Day, and that was not consciously planned. So,
Yeah.
but today for the deep dive in, we'll be talking about Josie and the Pussycats, the movie from the early 2000s, and Spice World, also from that time period. And it's, to me, the whole early 2000s girl band thing is very intriguing because they were so predominant in the late 90s, early 2000s with Spice Girls and TLC and the Pussycat Dolls, which will be brought up in a little bit. But you also had overseas in the UK, you had Mystique was another girl group. And there was a few others I'm missing, but you had, they all had interesting videos and interesting songs, and so this will be a very unique conversation to hear from your ladies' perspectives on that whole culture and what you guys think it is, and from a feminine perspective, well, I guess a place that we could possibly start is, before we heavily dive into the movies, is, you know, being younger and listening to whatever your favorite girl band was. What what made them like stick out to you maybe growing up, and looking back at it now, is there anything that kind of a synchronicity when you look back at it, or something, a detail that you can look back and you see now that you didn't see back then?
I'm just thinking. Because I guess like the first one that I really liked was the Spice Girls. You know, that was an actual group. Because most of what was in America was like boy groups at that time. And like TLC, that had already happened, kind of like they already had most of their bigger stuff. So they weren't really around as much. And like the Spice Girls were just like everywhere. So it was like, you know, how you can't avoid Coco Melon or Baby Shark right now. It was kind of like that. And so I did really like them, and I liked the whole girl power thing. And, you know, there was a lot of um feminism in the 90s that was like, I think, good feminism compared to kind of what it has turned into. um and I mean, there's good aspects, but it's like it has become infiltrated by some weird thing. We'll kind of probably get into that more later. But I do think, like, you know, everybody should be looked at as a human first, and then, you know, maybe your gender, it can come into play. But everybody's a human being, so I kind of liked, you know, and I've been watching old 90s cartoons with my kid, and they were kind of bringing up the whole like gender roles and how, you know, boys can like dresses or whatever, and dolls, and girls can like cars and stuff. And I think that's a good point to be made. Like, that was a good thing that came out of that, is like, you know, anybody can like whatever, you know. It doesn't have to, you know, you don't have to assign like cleaning does not mean girl, like, and, you know, fixing a car or building a house does not mean boy. Like, the things and activities don't need to be assigned to genders necessarily. So I think that was a good part that came out of it, and that's probably what kind of drew me to that. um Something that I noticed from both of the movies is there was like no romances really. There's a little thing with like the managers, but that was pretty much it. And then like the main character in Josie and the Pussycats, but I think that was more just to stay with the comic book and what was going on with that. So
Yeah. Jen, what was
I just had to look it up because in my mind, the timelines are melding together, but like I'm trying to remember, was it Spice Girls first for me or was it All Saints? If you guys remember All Saints.
is that a Canadian thing?
Is it?
I
Oh no,
was like,
they're from London.
oh, I don't remember them
And
at all.
okay, yes, you would know. If you heard the song Never Ever, you would know. And Pure Shores, yeah, you would
Nope.
know. I'll send it to you. You'll be like, oh yeah, this is this song. And I can't remember if it was All Saints first or Spice Girls, but definitely Spice Girls was a big thing. But in my memory, TLC and like slash Destiny's Child came like after. It was like the kind of R&B, like leaning into hip hop, like after the pop Spice Girls, like British Invasion 2.0
Yeah.
happened. But and there's like reality TV shows, of like making girl bands. And by that point, it had just gotten so tired. It was just like, ugh, don't give me another girl band. Like, we don't want it. So then it became like co-ed, right? It was just like, we've done the boy bands, we've done girl bands, let's do
like S Club 7?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And actually, the maker of S Club 7 is the same guy. Simon Farrell? What's his
Yeah.
name?
They just announced a reunion tour, I believe.
Oh,
It's not the
Simon
same like
Fuller.
Simon from like American
Simon
Idol.
Fuller. No, but he sued Simon Cowell for like intellectual property because Simon Fuller also made the Idol series. But Simon Cowell did X Factor. So he sued Simon Cowell for both Brits, both named Simon. Anyway,
Yeah.
but the Simon Fuller guy's interesting. Anyway, we could get into that, but yeah, lost my train of thought. Good start, Jen. But anyway, they made S Club 7 and I don't know. I just was kind of like, oh, that's what girl bands are. It's like kind of cookie cutter. And the Pussycat Dolls, not Josie and the Pussycat Dolls, but the Pussycat Dolls came, I feel like, way later. And I was just like totally not into it, just like pass, over it. But saw like Destiny's Child live and was, taken back by Beyonce's singing ability, however people feel about her or her politics or what she does, but like an amazing vocalist. Like her dad made her run and sing as a young kid to like have this amazing vibrato. So because of that experience watching them live, we had gotten tickets to go see TLC, and I was so excited because I was like, oh, if it's anything like Destiny's Child, this is going to be awesome. And we saw videos of them live and they had like ropes they were going to come down on. It looked epic, but then Left Eye died. So never got to see them live. But,
Wow.
that's my girl band history in a nutshell.
Yes. It's interesting you bring up Left Eye because I was a big NSYNC fan. Like I still have all their albums packed away within my CD collection. Like I was like 4, 5, 6, and I was like obsessed with like NSYNC and like Justin Timberlake. I even had a VHS of like NSYNC and Britney Spears behind the scenes. If
Oh,
anyone
yeah.
remembers those VHS tapes. But one of the songs that always kind of makes me laugh about NSYNC is on their No Strings Attached album. There's a song called Space Cowboy, Yippee Yippee Ki Yippee Ki Yo, or something like that.
Okay.
But it's featuring Left Eye, and
Oh,
the song is all about Y2K, and they're saying like don't be afraid, like don't let all these prophecies like scare you, like trust your inner self, and like space is the next frontier. We're all going to be out there in the new millennium. We're going to be up there in the heavens, and like all this messaging within this like very cookie
What?
cutter
The
song.
lyrics are like, everybody's talking about Jerusalem.
Yeah,
I put that. What? Okay.
it's that's very it's but yeah, it's featuring Left Eye, and the her one of the last things she says at the end of her rap verse is um one she goes, one love, Left Eye. She goes, it's like join in sync, one love, Left Eye. So she's saying be in sync, one love, Left Eye. And it makes me curious. Yeah, that's just a rapper tag, but I'm like, well, what is that actually about? Because you're rapping about, or you're singing about, um, in a humorous way, this idea of like Y2K, and like this, um, ending of times, really. So it's so it's cheesy, but it's like, is there a conspiracy behind it? And
yeah,
speaking of conspiracies, there are so many conspiracies around all these groups. Like Jen mentioned Beyonce. Like everyone, when they talk about the Illuminati, they're like Beyonce, Kanye West. Like those are the first two names when people think Illuminati, right? um but also, this can get us into the Pussycat dolls in particular, because there was a conspiracy about the Pussycat dolls. One of the original members tweeted out that the band was a front, the girl band Pussycat Dolls was a front for trafficking, and they was actually trafficking these girls around the world, and it was just a cover. Um, and then shortly after she tweets this out, um, one of the other girls that I think was like Nicole, one of the more known members of the group, was like, "Oh no, that never happened. Don't listen to this one. She's bitter or whatever." Like she was like trying to like, these are not the joys you're looking for. Charlie to extract what they're looking for. In our chat, possibly Rachel and Shaney, when they pop in, would have more to say on this. Um, Rachel and I was talking about ballerinas, and how ballerinas was the same way. Like touring ballerina, I don't know what you call it. I don't want to call it bands, recitals or whatever. Um, a lot of them would be for trafficking as well, and there
yeah,
would be this exploitation of these talented women, right? And so and then look at
yeah,
all the ballerina symbolism um, that we see in movies, and we even have the creepy ballerina boxes in horror movies, the music box,
yeah,
and that shows up a lot. So you we have we have this idea on all all of this, and would I would like to know what you guys think about that, and that whole culture of kind of are these groups, yeah, they're showing their talents, because like, you know, these women are talented, but there is that exploitation part of it. What is you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I'm glad you brought up ballerinas, because they that's kind of the main thing of the movie Red Sparrow, and that's with Jennifer Lawrence. And I have some stuff on the Hunger Games to tie in with Josie and the Pussycats. But speaking of Josie and the Pussycats, I kind of wanted to come back to TLC a little bit. And they had mentioned, so it's weird the celebrities that they mention in the movie, because that's one of the bands that they mention. And then they also have like on the screen how they're like breaking up bands and stuff like this. They have the Spice Girls, and then there are like a couple of X's on the Spice Girls of the members of them. So I thought that was really interesting, considering it was shot, well, it was released not very long before Lisa had her, or yeah, I'll just call her Lisa, her left eye, had her car accident. And so it's really weird to me, because I remember I watched her documentary, The Last Days of Left Eye, which was on Behind the Music, which is what they bring up on Josie and the Pussycats as one of their ways to make money and reveal what they're doing or whatever. So she had went down to South America, and she was kind of studying like holistic healing with Dr. Sebi. And the whole time she's like, I always feel like there's something following me. And then, you know, she got in one car crash and she was fine. And then like it wasn't even that much longer later that she got in another car crash. But I also have weird thoughts about Dr. Sebe too, because he's against garlic, and you know how I feel about that. If you're against garlic, like there's something not right.
You're probably a vampire.
Yeah, it's like the queen doesn't like garlic. There's like some other, she was like came out and said the royals, they can't eat garlic. I was like, that's not right. That's like, that doesn't seem right to me. But yeah, so I found it really interesting that they were like comparing, so it's Alan Cummings is like this record producer guy, or he's like a talent scout or something. And which, like Jen said earlier before we kind of started going, he's in both movies. And so in this movie, in Josie and the Pussycats, he's like the talent scout slash manager, kind of record producer. He's not really a producer because he doesn't really do anything with the recording. So I don't really know, like, is he like a PR? He's something like that. And he's talking, like trying to get the like main lady on the project, like get her to sign off on these 3 girls. And he's like, oh well, just imagine it's like TLC except for with 2 white chicks. And I was like, well, that's a really weird way to say it. And then like there was some other like references, or like 3 Christina Aguileras. I was like, that's really weird. And one of them just happens to, like, they always like had to make a reference to skin color, which I thought was kind of also weird. But it's kind of, that was like, and during that time it was a little bit more like common to like just point it out for no reason. I think we've come a long way as far as that goes, but yeah, so that was one of the references, and especially with the behind the music thing, where I was like, oh, they're really saying things here. So and I don't know if I even realized that the first time that first couple of times that I watched it, because I think I probably watched it like a year or so after it was released and didn't really remember it. And then I was like, later on, I was like, oh, what were some movies that I liked when I was younger? I was like, oh, this one seems pretty cool. And I put it on with like, after I had started kind of getting into conspiracies, and I was like, whoa, like, this is something else. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they also used Josie and Pussycats knowing that the Pussycat dolls would later on
Right.
be used. Yeah, Jen, what are your thoughts on all this ballerinas
So did you
and
guys like, were
exploitation
you
stuff?
into Archie comics at all? Like
Yeah.
the OG Josie and the Pussycats?
Yeah.
I wasn't really, but I do recognize that name is from comics. So I'm curious, like, how the movie version compares to, how they were in the comic books, because was Archie talking about mind control, like, in music?
Well,
Maybe I missed it, but
that's the weird thing. Now we have Riverdale. It's the teen drama that everyone kind of laughs at, but also it's um they talk about conspiracies and the paranormal and alternate dimensions and all this far out stuff in the show, and they kind of laugh at it like, isn't it ridiculous that we're making Archie do all this real psychedelic things? It's like, well, I don't watch the show, but I have heard people talk about it. I'm like, wait, what is it? What are you saying? But I wouldn't doubt it because of Josie and the Pussycats. And I never read the comics, but I did watch the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, Josie and the Pussycats. And that they kind of wanted to do like a Scooby-Doo thing where they like would solve mysteries and everything. So the whole plot in the movie of them being used for mind control and them wanting to expose the mind control that the corporations are doing is very in line to the cartoon of that's something that would happen on an episode I could see.
okay.
Yeah. I thought that even the origin of the cartoon, like the animated, well, even the comic book, because I'm not sure which came first, if they went into the comic book first or they had the cartoon first. But I think it was one of the Hanna-Barbera people, or the creator of it, said that they based it off of their wife, who was wearing a cat, like a leopard cat costume on a cruise once. And I was like, well, that's really weird. like, so you want to make kids like watch your wife? And it was just weird. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't, I'm unfortunately lacking in knowledge of Josie and the Pussycats. Not
Yeah.
sure, but I do know that it looks like, Rosario Dawson was in the movie, and wasn't she dating like that senator? And he was like, my boo, Rosario Dawson. Cory Booker.
I don't know.
I don't know if they're still
politics-
together or
I'm
not.
not a
but
politics person.
talking about trafficking,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's probably like a contractual relationship. This is speculation, though, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, so let's kind of get into the movies now a bit more. So Andy, since you've seen both of them, when um in general, I guess when you looking at the these two films together and you lay them out, you lay as if you laid out all your ingredients for like two sandwiches, right? and you're looking and comparing the two sandwiches, what sticks out to you that, and I know Jim pointed out that they have the same actor in it, but is there anything that stuck out to you that they both kind of included, whether it's a idea, theme, or maybe a 90s jukebox song or whatnot, or anything like that?
Yeah. So when you look at them both together, they're obviously about like mind control and like, you know, recording industry slaves. And so we'll put it in that term. And then you'll see a lot of the color coding for these programs in both of the movies. There's a lot of exposing like the calculated breaking up of the bands and things like that. And the really like when you don't have a say in what actually goes on in your life once you get into this contract with the record producers or Hollywood in general, because I'm sure it's the same for like actors and things. But another thing that stuck out to me in contrast is like the Spice Girls movie or Spice World was the idea of the Spice Girls. So that one seems more like whistleblowery, whereas the Josie and the Pussycats seems more like this tongue-in-cheek kind of in your face, like hidden in plain sight kind of disclosure of things going on. And then I've also found it interesting that the Spice Girls one came out in 99, so before Y2K, and then Josie and the Pussycats came out in 2001, so after Y2K. So there was this weird kind of like shift after Y2K and all that stuff happened. You can kind of see in the fashion where it's like very tight put together outfits and stuff, and then like this like kind of like slouchy boudoir, like more hippy dippy than like what the Spice Girls had, which they kind of had that more mod feeling. Like if you're gonna go with the nostalgia spell, like Kris, you have a talk with Slick Dissident about the nostalgia spell. Well, it would be kind of like mod going from mod to Summer of Love type of thing. And so I just thought it was kind of interesting to see just between the 2 years or whatever span, how much, it just shifts just a little bit. And yeah. And I found it weird that you could not find anywhere to even rent or buy Spice World, whereas Josie and the Pussycats was like readily available, like anywhere.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
The production company that made Spice World was dissolved according to their like trademark as of it was like March 2021. So like it just happened. So I don't know if that's why it was maybe more challenging to find Spice World because of the Simon Fuller guy. But that's interesting. I didn't realize that they were released so close because the aesthetic is very different. And I don't know if it's like, Brit movie versus American movie aesthetic differences. But yeah, I guess I thought Josie and the Pussycats was released a lot later.
Yeah, well, also from an editing standpoint, um, just movies in general from before Y2K and after Y2K drastically changed the style and the way you would edit scenes together. And we saw the same thing happen recently around 2020 once everything started to go direct to streaming. The style of editing has completely changed. And the way we see color grading being used and pacing movies. And so you have that drastic change in style it's very shocking and very jarring. And it which gets into the whole how each decade kind of has its own like identity. Like the 80s is very 80s, the 90s is very 90s. But then when you get to Y2K and the early 2000s, people consider like 1998 to like 2003 its own like era. And then you have the early mid 2000s where everyone is like 2005 to like 2009. So it's like for the one of the first times we see almost like a decade with like an implanted decade, talking about implants, and implanted decade within a typical decade, like it's a section of a section type of a thing, which
Yeah.
which is interesting.
You're talking about editing, and so I've never seen this before, but my eyes caught it when the credits were rolling on Spice World. Is at the very end it says edited at the White House.
Yeah. I thought that was weird too. As
So
I
I
noticed
googled the
that.
White House thinking, oh, it's just a clever like film house or something, but I found nothing. So I'm like, for real? Is that
Yeah,
another movie and we're just not seeing it? But
I did
yeah.
not see that. That's
I think
interesting.
Cheney, I think last Saturday in Spiders was saying something about there's like a fake White House that sometimes that Tyler Perry
Oh,
has.
yeah,
So
the
I
Tyler
wonder if it
Perry
has
one.
something to do with that, because I mean he's obviously into things. Probably more than we realize. Yeah.
Totally. I
Yeah,
like what you said about the style of time, because I mean Andy and I were just talking about how like it's like, why does everybody's skin look so good in the 80s? Like, what was going on? And it's like
yeah,
a combination of things. But for real, like,
Yeah.
and then that time you mentioned, like, late 90s, early 2000s, when all the music had like synthesized harpsichord, intros.
yeah.
Just like every single song.
I like that. And then like acoustic guitar with it. Like you had to like have some type of organic instrument with your electronic sound.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um one thing that since we're talking about the Spice World, it is kind of they use this uh it to kind of retell the same story of A Hard Day's Night, which is the Beatles movie. So that really reinforces that whole second British invasion thing. And so if they're saying that the Spice Girls are the Beatles, well, I recently also watched the Elvis movie that recently came out.
Oh my gosh, Kris, like I literally just wrote the word, like, I can't see. I wrote Elvis question mark and then you said it.
Yeah.
Weird.
So so what so after I watched it, I was talking to Cheney about it, and maybe we can summon Cheney when we're talking about this.
Yeah.
She pointed out to me, and I had not thought about this. They had to send Elvis to join me. You know, that was a big part of his story, that he got sent off to war and he came back. Well, what happened during his time as a soldier? That's when the British invasion happened. That's when the Beatles came to America. And which, as Cheney pointed out, they had to send Elvis overseas so they can do the British invasion with the Beatles, because you can't have two powerhouse musicians going at it in the same territory. You can't have two alphas trying to roll over the same territory, sort of a thing, right? They're both very powerful icons, right? And so that got me thinking, okay, so if they're saying that Spice Girls was the second iteration of the Beatles, what was the second iteration of Elvis in this scenario? And Andy suggested me and her were tossing out names and trying to see who fit the motif of Elvis. And Andy pointed out that Britney Spears, she wore the jumper of that Elvis is famous for, and she also did her thing in Las Vegas, and she was even part of is a compilation album called like Sin something
Oh,
Sin.
SIN. So it was
Yeah,
Sin, and then there was also an Elvis track on there that they had re-released as like a remix. I remember that one because I was like, "Oh, this is neat" when it
yeah,
came out.
and of course Sin City, so that gets us back to Las Vegas and all
Yeah.
that. And then I had randomly put in as a joke Elvis and Britney Spears performing together on stage in the AI. And the AI spit out them getting married and kissing.
Well, yeah. And I'm
That,
glad that you brought that specific thing up because I was kind of like thinking about this today. I was like, what even is like the music British invasion? Like, what would that even be for? Like, why would you do that? And then it was like, so it's weird because they reference Elvis as the king, right, of like rock and roll. And then Britney Spears is supposed to be like the princess of pop. So that's really kind of weird that like AI put them together that way. And like you didn't say anything about kissing or anything. So it was like really weird. And I was like, what is AI trying to say to us? Like, is AI trying to give us little like hints and things? And then I still think it's weird because I think it's like 75 or 80% of the world's land mass is actually crown land. So I was like, are they just like, this is the one part of the land that we don't actually own? So we have to like somehow get them to want to be British or something? Like, I don't understand what's going on here.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Jen, did
my
you have any
opinion that
thoughts on this?
The Beatles kind of just like took everything from Little Richard. They learned all the ooh from Little Richard. But okay, I thought it was so random. Like young me didn't see it at all. I didn't know who Elvis Costello was at the time. But watching the movie again, I'm like, there's the bar scene where their manager and Deborah are sitting and they're having a drink and they're like, oh my gosh, like the Spice Girls are gonna come to their show, like so stressed out. And she's ordering a drink from the bartender, and the bartender is Elvis Costello, and he has like no lines. It's the most randomest like casting part ever. It's just like so in your
I
face.
didn't
It's
even
like,
notice that.
okay, sure. But I'm just like, it made me scratch my head. I was just like, really? Like people would recognize, like, you know, Dave Menda gets a big role. Jennifer Saunders gets a pretty decent, you know, role of dialogue there. So these little cameos of famous people, but Elvis Costello's just like, what can I get you? And
Yeah,
yeah.
that's like meat. Okay, so one thing, speaking of like cameos, is Meatloaf is the bus driver in Spice Girls, right?
Was he?
And
I don't think
yes,
he is.
he is.
Oh my gosh.
And so I thought it was kind of weird
Oh
when
yeah.
Alan Cummings is also in this other movie, and then he stops and sees he's like out looking for bands in Riverdale of all places for some reason, and he has to pump the brakes really quick because Josie and the Pussycats are in front of him, and then they play Paradise by the Dashboard Light, and I was like, what's up with that? Like, why would they have Meatloaf of all people like in that movie? And that movie is like one of the two or three songs that isn't an actual Josie and the Pussycats song.
Yeah,
So
and when he slams on his brakes because Josie and Pussycat run out in the middle of the road, and they stop and they're like deer in the headlights. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna get hit by a car," and they stop.
yeah.
And when he stops, he takes out the CD case and he takes out the cover, so it's the plastic, so you can just see through it, and he lifts it up, so to kind of envision them on a cover of a CD. So he's framing Josie and the Pussycats. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to frame them for both their mind control. So he's like, can I frame these people? And he lifts the CD frame up to frame Josie and the Pussycats. And he's like, yep, I can frame them. And that's when he's like, hey, ladies, want to make a deal with the devil? Here's my card.
Right.
Wow, that's such a good weep about Meatloaf. Oh my gosh. I didn't
Wait,
realize
is
that.
Meatloaf the devil?
Oh.
Only if it's made out of ground beef.
All I have on that is like, oh, my parents met Meatloaf, and I thought that was pretty cool.
That is cool.
Wow. Oh yeah. Oh,
That
yeah.
is cool.
And there's the guy who's like the evil photographer guy.
Yeah.
Damien. He's Riff Raff from Rocky Horror
What?
Picture Show, which also has Meatloaf in it. Oh my gosh.
What the heck? Does it have Alan Cummings?
Oh my gosh.
That guy's everywhere. But so that's really weird. Speaking of the creepy photographer guy, they both kind of have this like creepy lurker guy who's always like in the shadows. So I thought that was kind of weird, like a weird little theme, like, oh, like if you're a famous woman, or like if you're a woman of any recognition, you're always gonna have these lurkers and stuff. And like they both turn out to be like okay or whatever. Like I like in the credits on Spice World, like the Riff Raff or whatever the actor's name is, he's like, the kids are gonna hate me. They're gonna like, and I thought that character too. I was like, there was like some nods to other films, and I was like, he totally reminds me of like these guys that are in the sewers, and I know I'm gonna mess up their name. From Delicatessen, and I was like, that's really weird that like they would reference some weird French film in the Spice World movie.
Yeah.
Speaking of French films, I kind of skipped over this when I was talking about ballerinas. Um, there is a Jennifer Connelly movie. So she went over to France when she was younger, back in like her Labyrinth days. She went over to France and made this French movie called, I think it's like Estelle, is what the French word for ballet is. And we're talking about exploiting these women for their talents. And on the cover of this film, it's Jennifer Connelly spread out, all spread out in her ballerina outfit, and there's a black swan coming down to land on her. But if you're viewing it in the right, in not the right, but in a mindset, it could be alluded to more of an explicit act if the bird is coming down as she's all spread out.
Like Zeus coming down and raping people as a swan.
Yeah. And the whole movie is she's an American ballet performer that comes to France, and she gets solely possessed by a spirit of a deceased a French ballet performer, and she slowly turns into her so she can reenact her death because she died during a performance.
Yeah.
So
That's a pretty cool movie.
it's that it always makes me weird because you also have the new John Wick movie that they're making the spin-off of, and it's called Ballerina, and it's about like female assassins.
Yeah.
So we have these ballerina connections to girl groups in general, because even girl groups they they have to dance and sing, just like boy bands have to dance and sing. Do you know all the steps to bye bye bye, or sort of a thing?
Yeah.
So there's that, and it's very interesting. And then in Spice World, what I thought was interesting that Andy pointed out to me early on is the white Medusa.
Yeah.
And I realized that there are a lot of album covers and music videos and things, especially in this world of music and performers and all that use the white Medusa symbolism. Would you like to get more into that, Andy?
Yeah. So what I noticed in Spice World is, and since the movie is so hard to see, I'm gonna say spoiler alert. But so their friend, and I wonder if this friend is like a real life friend or if it's just part of the story, because I didn't really look into that too much. But so she's pregnant and like they're gonna do this show, but she's gonna have the baby, and they're like kind of like in this thing where they're not gonna do the show or whatever, and they just take her out dancing. And so of course she's like 9 months pregnant lady, she's out dancing, she goes into labor. So they're at this nightclub, and I'm pretty sure it's the same nightclub that they used in at least one of the Austin Power movies. So there's that. And and I'll probably come back to some more kind of things I noticed in between that movie and this movie. But so there's a scene where she's going into labor, and then they just cut for like 1 or 2 frames to this one person dancing in like all white costume with like kind of like snake hair, but not quite. And I was like, and then the next scene, it's like the hospital or the ambulance or something. And I was like, well, that's weird. Why would they? So I kind of paused it and went back. I was like, why would they just have this one random thing? And so I was like, that's weird. Okay, I said that's weird like 50 times probably. Because it's like this movie is telling you they're trying to birth this white Medusa type of thing, because she goes into birth, or she goes into labor, that scene, and then, oh, right away, ambulance. So it's like, okay, what is this white Medusa? And so I kind of did some research, and Medusa is used a lot in the feminist movement, and it's used by like some politicians and stuff. Um, and like she kind of has evolved over the years of being like this monster who just turns men to stone or whatever, to kind of like this representation of justice for, you know, wrongdoings to females like rape and things like that. So, because that's part of her story, is she was raped by Perseus, I want to say. I could be wrong on that. But so yeah, that's kind of, and she's a Gorgon. And then they have I watch Josie and the Pussycats, and like one of their main like product placements is Starbucks. So they have, you know, this white Medusa thing going on again with that. So I was like, okay, what is really going on with this? And I come across just randomly, this guy Robert Graves comes up in my recommendation. So I watched this one video on him. And then something else about him comes up because I had watched that video. And he was a Freemason and a Sufi and a poet and I think something else. And so they're talking about how he was a big fan of H.P. Lovecraft. And so he kind of wanted to figure out this idea of like a primordial, he called it the white goddess. And it was kind of like his muse, ultimate muse or whatever. And it's like a lot of the video that I found was and it's in the Telegram chat for this, and maybe we could put a link in the YouTube or whatever, and Odyssey when you release to that. He's saying that a lot of these like new neo-paganists use this as like gospel basically, when it's not really like supposed to be taken as a real god. So like Wiccans and things like that would also probably use this like it's kind of like a Luciferian type of figure, but a little bit more feminine than I think what is going on there. But it's totally become like an egregore basically. And so I think that some of the higher ups in, you know, I guess the world in general, because, you know, Hollywood is kind of tied in with things like that, probably follow this kind of false, like made up god, you know, or a goddess, and thinking that, oh, this is a real thing, but he was just kind of like using it as a way to express, you know, a muse that he cannot quite grasp what it is, you know, like it's just like he's always chasing after it, and he doesn't like really know what inspires him to write or whatever. He's just like making something up so that he can attribute it to something and kind of personify it through his works.
Yeah, that is interesting. This idea of the muse, and look how many people in especially when these groups was popular and releasing music and videos and touring and everything in their heyday, they was people's muses. You had not only little girls, but young boys infatuated with them, and they would make art or decorate their room as such, and they would be the muse for basically that whole generation. And as cookie cutter as these groups are, you could say whether it's a boy band or a girl band or S Club 7 even, they are it's like a store-bought cookie versus like your mom's homemade cookie, right? Like, you just like cookies. Like, you don't care really if it's homemade cookie or if it's like a chip ahoy sort of thing. Like, maybe you get a preference over time, but if you put two chocolate chip cookies out in front of a kid, they're gonna be like, oh well, I just want a chocolate chip cookie for everything. So they would just be like, oh, you want music? Well, here's music. Plus, here are some, pretty girls or powerful women-led bands, or some good-looking dudes who can dance, and there's more in touch with the feminine side or whatever, that are singing love songs or whatever the case may be. Here's your candy as well, and then we're still talking about them. We're still talking about Justin Timberlake. We're still talking about Beyonce. We're still talking about Britney Spears. Is she okay? Is, is she being managed? How is her manager? That's one thing that to briefly go back to the Elvis movie. I thought what's interesting about that movie was just like these movies is predominant of Elvis's manager. In fact, in the Elvis movie, it's told from his manager's perspective. Like, it's called Elvis, but it's told from the manager's perspective. And the manager is always creeping around and was like, Elvis was I was the showman, because he used to work at a carnival. So he was like, I was the showman, and Elvis was my act that I would unveil to the world. And then he would be like behind the curtain watching, like everyone would go crazy for him, and he's just like hiding behind the curtain. And it's like, oh, that's creepy. And
Right.
all these, both of these movies as well, if you pick the managers as creepy and evil and the antagonists of these stories, right?
Yeah.
And so, and we see that in today's time. I mean, remember a few years ago, the whole thing with Kesha, like, free Kesha,
Right.
thing that was going on. She wanted to be free of whatever that guy's name, her producer and record company that she was tied to. So
Mhm.
it's being acted out in the real world. What are your guys' thoughts? Um, was they foreshadowing in these movies all these stories in present day, or what, with these antagonizing the manager?
Yeah, it's like, triggering word, but there's always like a head J to manage the boy bands. Like, speaking of Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, those were both owned and ran by like Lou Pearlman, right? Lou
Yeah.
Pearlman found these guys And he's got a really interesting story. Like he frauded a bunch of people out of money for his like Zeppelin business that he was gonna, I think it was like blimp tours, which is kind of, you know, unfortunate because he was kind of a big guy, you know, and he's got like
He's like, just come look at me. That's your blimp tour.
and he didn't have a blimp. And so eventually got found out, and like then he went into boy bands, and you know, he saw himself as like the other member of the group who just like wasn't on stage. And it was like, you know,
He was super creepy
so creepy.
too. Yeah.
For sure. And just a weird think about like blimps. I was looking up some of the venues that they shot the movie Spice World in because I was curious about the history. And anyway, just a totally random sync, but the cafe, the Rendezvous Cafe, that they are talking to Brian, and they're like, it's reminiscing of like when they were before they hit it big or whatever. I guess that part of London was like demolished or affected by the Zeppelin raids. So it's just like weird to think about Zeppelin. So random. But yeah.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I don't know where Lou Pearlman is now. He might be gone.
I think they like weren't they working on like
Oh.
indicting him or something for all the scamming and taking money from the bands, which is good. But I think to bring up Alan Cummings again, because so he's in both these movies. Then he later is in the Tin Man sci-fi miniseries as the Straw Man. And so I kind of thought, oh, well, is his career kind of like pointing out straw man? Because I haven't really heard too much from him since then. And so in Spice World, which is 2 years before Josie and the Pussycats, he plays this documentary maker, and he's like just interested in like, oh, what are the Spice Girls all about, you know? And so it's like that a lot of the time they'll be like, oh, this documentary person, they don't know what they're talking about. And so the next movie he's like a manager, and then it turns out at the end he's just like some nerd from somewhere. And so I was like, oh, they do blame a lot of stuff on just like the managers and stuff like that when there's totally this whole other thing going on. So I was like, that's interesting. That the next thing he's in, he plays this, you know, the straw man or the scarecrow, basically.
Yeah. Well, in Josie and the Pussycat, he's albino. Like he wipes off his makeup and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm albino."
Right.
And like that's such a weird thing. Like he like Scooby Doo, like, "Oh, makeup's on, I'm albino," and it's like,
Yeah.
"What?"
That was such a Scooby-Doo ending. So
Yeah.
that was really fitting for the comics.
And then, what did you think about the other manager producers, like the girl that was like his love interest, but she was like the real mastermind behind the whole scheme, and she was trying to like, not only was she trying to hypnotize the public, but she was also trying to hypnotize government figures. She was having them come in and test the music.
Yeah.
And like they had that whole bit where she would see something, like she would like shake their hand and then agree and then like say something underneath her breath as they're walking away, and you're like, wait, what did you say? Did you say you're gonna try to hypnotize me too? And she's like, oh no, I said this other thing. He goes, okay, it sounded like you said something else. He goes, no, don't worry about it. And he walks away again, and he goes, oh, that was a close one. He goes, wait, do you say that was a close one? And they stay on the scene for like such a long time. I was like, why are they focused in on her doing that. And then something else I thought was weird about her character was she had this like juvenile, almost like alter ego. Like when Josie and the Pussycats first meet her, she has her whole bedroom decked out as like a teenage girl room, and then she's like, "Okay, let's do our makeup, and we can like do our own thing." I was like, "Okay." And at first, I thought that was like her mastermind plan to like get close, and but then towards the end of the movie, when she reveals her real self, when Alan Cumming is like, "Oh, I'm albino," or she's like, "Oh, I have the missing." Was it her missing teeth that she takes out? She starts taking out things off of her
Yeah,
body, and then she starts talking like a um a, like a young like preteen girl again. And so like so that wasn't an act. That was her true self. So it's almost like she has some type of split personality. Like
right.
she was hypnotized. She had some MK Ultra, so she was trying to implement everyone else as well.
Right. And that's so two things with her. So I was reminded of, I think her name is the villain on Powerpuff Girls, her name is Princess. And she tries to always act like she's like the fourth Powerpuff Girl, and she's like got all this money, and but then she's just like really evil, so it doesn't really make any sense why she's trying to do this. And then she also reminded me, especially they have like just like one cut or like a couple of frames where they're just right on her with the feather costume and the like collar thing. And it totally reminded me of Hunger Games, which was weird because earlier in the movie I had wrote down Hunger Games makeover stuff. So when I was reading those books, I was like, oh, that's what they're doing in Hollywood. Like they're just like, especially, I was especially reminded of like the makeover scenes in like America's Next Top Model. It's like, oh, we'll scrub you down and we'll give you this new hair and make you look all fancy. And then it's totally like just this front for like maybe you really did have talent and stuff, but they have to like package it in a way when it's like it's not really necessary, for one thing. And it was just so weird to me that there was this thing. And so I was like, and then they're from Riverdale, which is supposed to be like the middle of nowhere or whatever, because that's also where the plane crashed. And they were right before the plane crashes, he goes into the cockpit and he says, "Take the Chevy to the levee." And I was like, "Oh, American Pie, they're gonna Buddy Holly him." And then so that was like in the middle of nowhere. That was in Clear Lake, Iowa, I want to say. And so I was like, okay, so they take these people from the middle of nowhere, they're like they're dumb or something. So, and that's kind of where they're um getting them into these contracts because they're they're ignorant to the ways of Hollywood or whatever. And um that's kind of like what's going on in the Hunger Games, is like, oh, they have a few that are like, they're always winning from the one district, the like more rich type district. And then the lower district, like I think Katniss, the main character, she's from like a coal mining district or something like that. So like they don't expect her to win or anything, but they get everybody all dolled up and like they plan to just kill them at the end. So I was like, that's like the same kind of a thing. And so we're kind of going with this narrative over time that just keeps playing out. And it's kind of like, where did this actually start? Because even with like we bring up this nostalgia spell and the 60s and stuff, and we kind of know that kind of started like a little bit before that. But then what was going on before that, even to where we learned these things where we could manipulate people like that, like, is it's very sad and but very interesting at the same time. So
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything, Jen, on that?
Sorry guys, my dog really needed to go outside, so I
That's okay.
missed a chunk.
That's
Oh,
okay.
fine. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. Um, yeah, that I've been on, I've been on this HP Lovecraft kick for a minute now. And it what you're talking about, Andy, makes me think of how H.P. Lovecraft was alive during the Industrial Revolution. So he was um he was one of the first people, the first generation of people to be like in large cities and not be connected with nature. And that's where a lot of his doom and gloom comes from, is seeing the giant industrial complexes that was being put up and everything. And now we're getting a lot of that arising again, and why Lovecraft is so popular right now is because we're seeing all these digital things come up, and there was that doom and gloom of the isolation again. And I'm wondering, you're saying, uh, where did we learn this on how you manipulate someone's mind? I'm wondering, and advancement in technology is always good. We should always want to move forward. But I'm wondering if one of the early ceilings to what we're talking about was putting people in bigger cities and kind of concentrating them so it would be easier to affect their mind in certain ways. And then you can, if you have a concentrated city, you wouldn't even have to do much because they would be so close that they're feeding on each other's energies, and they're inspiring each other, creating their own culture. Just like when you're in a lab and you have an experiment, and like a micro environment, right? And a similar thing would happen. So then you would have um, them creating their own music and things, and all you would have to do is set up the environment just right, and they would do the rest themselves. So, and that gets me to present day, where 2020 happens, we're all locked inside, but we have all this amazing technology, and you get a lot of bedroom producers. But you look at their music and you listen to them, and it's sad girl music, it's sad boy music. So if we don't want to listen to sad boy or sad girl music, we have to go to happy music. Well, if there was no new happy music, then we need to go back to the whole nostalgia thing and listen to things that are in the past, which will be these bands, these groups like Spice Girls. But then, oh no, Pussycat Dolls said they're trafficking, so they're hashtag ruining our childhood at the same time. So they're pushing us into nostalgia, but then they're also like, well, we're also going to ruin your childhood. So it's that jerking around of your really your brain. They're like, oh, I want to be nostalgic, but it's just kind of sad because all this new stuff coming on. That's just like there's all those podcasts where you can rewatch your favorite show, but you can also listen to some of the secondary actors have come together to make a watch along podcast, so you can listen to it, like Wizards of Waverly Place and such, where these actors are giving you the inside scoop of each individual episode, so you can watch the episode and listen to the podcast where they're doing the behind the scenes of it, just like behind the music stuff from the movie, right? Or if you listen to these behind these watch along podcasts, I mean, they're saying some pretty adult stuff about people wanting to get good with Selena Gomez, and she was a child actress at the time, and they're messaging the actors around her to try to get in good with her, and they're saying this. So again, it's that whole ruining your childhood. So you're watching it, and then you're listening to the podcast episode, and then you hear, oh, those people that were trying to be creepy when I was Selena Gomez on the set of Wizards of Waverly Place. What? So now you're like, do I want to watch it now? Because it's kind of weird knowing that was happening as they were filming these scenes.
Yeah.
So there's all that culture as well.
It's kind of like, we have Josie and the Pussycats and the whole Archie universe and Hanna-Barbera stuff it's pretty mild, and then they put, this is kind of like the first layer of grime that they have put on Riverdale, and then they just, Sabrina is also a resident of Riverdale, so they made her just, they had that out in the 90s. Now, 30 years later, they come out with it again and just make it dark as fuck.
Oh,
And then they do the same thing with Archie and everybody else. And it's like, that was one of the most innocent, kind of more teenagery things. And it's like, for teenagers, there's like, what do you watch that's kind of innocent?
totally. I think that that's the biggest thing about the nostalgia spell, in my opinion, is that they pushed it too far into this like dark perversion, that they're like, okay, well, we did really good in the 90s, so let's just bring it back and like we'll just rehash all this stuff we made in the 90s, because like that worked pretty good. People were digging on that. I went to some store and I was like walking through the party section, and this was when like the Lion King remake was out and Toy Story remake was out, and they had like paper plates and decor that was like the animated Lion King and Toy Story. And I took a photo of the shelf and I'm like, did I travel back in time? Like, what's going on? It's like the printers of the party place is like, oh great, we could just use the same dyes, like we'll just print more of these plates from the 90s and resell them because the movie's out again. It's so weird.
Right. And it's kind of like, Spice Girls. Well, they had their faces on everything. You had Spice Girl lollipops, and I'm sure there's other bands and stuff, but that was like the first band that I can remember being like, wow, there's a Spice Girl lollipop? Like, that's crazy. And the lollipops that sponsor Spice Girls are the same lollipops who their original logo was designed by Salvador Dali. So I was like, that's so weird. And now we have a AI program that makes art called Dolly. So it's like, it's so just weird of these little details. Like,
Yeah, that's something that was also weird in the Elvis movie. In that movie they credit this whole putting the singer's face on everything to the manager of Elvis, because according to the Elvis biopic, it had never been thought of before. And he was like, oh yeah, let's just slap Elvis's face on everything. That's why you had Elvis, like all this Elvis merchandise. And and they made they had like a whole scene of like showing all the different merchandise, and Elvis is like, "Why do you want my face on toilet paper?" Like,
They had like Spice Girls like Barbie dolls. Like
Oh, I had one.
I don't remember any other band that had, maybe there were, but I don't remember any other band that had like dolls or that were as successful, you know?
yeah, well,
Did you
oh
have
yeah,
an NSYNC doll, Chris?
yeah, they had, yeah, they did. They
Okay,
didn't
okay.
have one, but I know they sell
Yeah.
NSYNC dolls.
They had Britney Spears ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had all the other Spice Girls were sold out. So I had to get Scary Spice, but I was like, that's cool. I like Scary Spice. I was
Yeah.
like, I feel bad that she's the left behind one. Like she has cool style.
She does. And she had a great sense of, I don't know, watching, it was like a great sense of self. But to own the title Scary, you know, because it's like you're with your friends and you're gonna pretend Spice Girls, and no one wants to be Scary Spice, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder with the names too, because it's like in Britain, like things mean different. Like I remember, so in school, I think I was in second grade, and we were all playing the Spice Girls. And so
As you do.
somebody's like, you get to be posh. And I was like, ew. And now I'm like, oh, that's like a cool thing. But like, I didn't care about being like posh or whatever, because it's kind of means sexy, but like not really. It's like sexy, but like high end also.
Expensive, right.
Yeah. So like, it's kind of funny, as I wonder if scary just means like crazy, like in like Cockney or something. And like, yeah, all the spice names are
Yeah. I mean, ginger is really the only real spice. It's like,
right. And there was like those Old Spice jokes. They're like, I'm Old Spice.
oh yeah, okay.
What happened to Kris?
Oh, I'm still here.
Oh,
Boom. I stepped off for a second because I was messaging Shani. So
okay.
yeah, she said she got mixed up with the time zones in space,
Oh, of course.
which happened with that always happens with our group, since we're all
Yeah.
from different time zones. It's like,
See,
oh, what?
we're all central.
Yeah, I mean, we're all central, but
Hey,
You gotta
that's
say
very
it like
bad.
you're doing 90s TV announcements, and be like 8/7 Central, and then be like 10/9 Eastern. Like really quick at
Oh,
the
yeah.
end. Like
yeah.
they never said Pacific or Mountain. They were like, nah, we're not. I think they must have had like their own ads or something for the other half of the country, because
Could
that
be.
didn't make any sense to me.
Totally. Well, okay, so do you think like Alan Cummings was supposed to be cast for the manager role in Spice World, but he didn't? And then he
think-
got cast as like the manager for like the kind of remake, like Josie. It's like, it's okay, you'll be the manager for Josie and the Pussycats. Like, don't worry. We gave you this director role in the first movie for Spice World.
Well, they have like very similar like
Right?
mannerisms and costumes and stuff. So I was like, I think he just kind of like used that as inspiration. Like, I don't know, I'm like kung fu fighting when I'm talking about them, but like,
And there was like the, Roger Moore cameo, like James Bond 007, and he even
yeah.
when the manager's like, get some blood on the walls, and he's like, stir it up, and Roger Moore Chief is shaking, right? Shaking.
Yeah, that cracked
Chris
me up.
Martinez
I was like, oh,
no
how
need to
clever.
stir.
But I noticed like his character too, And I like how you said like stir it up, because there also was this like, so there's this other crew that's like pitching a movie, pitching this actual movie, basically, right? And so in
Oh,
that
and
scene they're
Josie and
like,
the
oh
Pussycats.
yeah, no, in Spice World. So there's like,
Okay, yeah,
there's the
sorry.
documentary crew, which is Alan Cummings and like some black guy and some other guy, and which I will never know who those people are. And I mean, I could look it up. They have names. But and then there's these other two guys
The
pitching.
guy from Cheers.
Yeah, and they're pitching like a TV. They're like, all of a sudden they're gonna pitch this TV show or movie or something to the manager of the Spice Girls. And so during that pitch scene, he's like, "Oh, we're cooking here." And so when you were like, "Oh, stir things up," I was like, "Is this like a reference to like spirit cooking or something?" Because that's really weirding me out. But
all
yeah, I
the
noticed.
checkerboard floors alone is just like
Yeah,
a little overdone. So I'm curious, did you see that in Josie and the Pussycats too?
yeah. Well, they
Yeah.
had a lot more of like the um. So it starts out with this boy band du jour, and their whole thing is like everything is red, so like their mind control for like the fans was like, you got to have red everything. And then it like, but it kind of switched around, which I think is like symbolism for like watering down like the divine masculine, because red is the divine masculine. And so they're like, oh no, we gotta have orange. And then it was pink, like, and that was all for the du jour stuff. But then all of a sudden, Josie and the Pussycats come in, and they're like, oh, everything has to be blue. And like their plane is blue and all this stuff. So there was a lot of like um weird stuff going on with divine feminine and divine masculine, because even in the beginning, it's like she's working on a truck, and then her boyfriend or love interest guy is just like, you know, it's kind of goes into that infantilism, like, oh, she's taking care of like everything, and then like he's just sitting there like playing guitar. Like you can kind of see that played
And
out. I don't know why I'm coughing so much.
and
But
then sorry, go ahead, Andy.
oh, um kind of like played out in relationships today a lot with like gamer people. Like I noticed like a lot of gamer guys, like I'll see like memes and stuff saying about how their girlfriend is kind of like their mom or whatever. And I was like, oh, that's kind of, I just kind of like noticed that about their dynamic in the beginning, and that like alongside the kind of watering down of the red in the movie right at the beginning. I was like, oh, okay, I kind of see what they're hinting at here.
Yeah, and then at the end, one of the final outfits Josie does or wears is that dark purple. Um, the I don't know. Were those skinny jeans back then?
I think there are flares. They're like those low-rise flares.
Yeah, but there was like dark purple. So when you bring the masculine and feminine together, the red and blue, that makes purple. That's the veil of illusion, right? So that's
And
right.
she's
That
the
was her.
redhead, right? Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
Mercury.
Redhead.
yeah, redhead.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's I I agree with what you're saying about the delusion, especially because um and it was actually one of my favorite scenes in Josie and the Pussycats is when he goes to the record store and he asks him to play the Dazor track over the speakers for the whole store. It's like, I got you an exclusive demo to test out for the upcoming Dejor single, the remix of, or whatever he calls it. And you put it in, and that's when the colors change, because everyone's mind controlled under the old song, and then he has them test out the new song, and you see the camera go through the whole, like it tracks the whole record store, and they're like, oh, I kind of want to change colors. Yeah, that's a neat color. And it's like, speaking of
Right.
colors, of course, in the background of Jin, you have that scene from Spice World, and we have blue and the red and the yellow. Why do you think they signed each girl that color, their color? Like,
I
is
thought
it?
it was interesting, even in like that Channel 5 like launch video
Yeah.
they did. They have, everyone has their own color, but they usually leave out, like if you're looking at them as like chakras, right? It's like root, sacral, solar, heart, throat, and that's it. And then there's no there's no third eye or crown. Anyway, I think that's right. Root, sacral, solar, heart, throat. Yeah. So there's no third eye or crown. So that's like your psychic, spiritual, tapped in radio channel. So it's like, nope, like, don't look over here, guys. Just, base reality. I don't know, but
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah. So when you're talking about watering down the masculine, there was totally a lot of that in Spice World. And because it's so in your face today, it's more subtle maybe at the time when Spice World came out. But looking at it with today's eyes, it's just like, oh, that's how they kind of like slip it in. And it was, seemingly like all cute and adorable, haha, funny. But like they are asking the girls, like, the documentary guys, what do you do with boys? Like, how are you with boys? What about boys? And their response was, you should just be able to ring them up and order them like a pizza. And then they proceed on like enumerating their pizza order.
Right.
And just like, okay, so basically like minimizing that exchange, that experience. It's just like a pizza. And then there's even a scene where Jerry's talking to this guy, and he's totally like scared to talk to her. And she's even saying this, like, yeah, sometimes we're so famous that guys don't know how to talk to us. And he, bows out to go to the bathroom because he can't handle like talking to her. So it was really subtle moments, but it's like, why would you include that in the movie? It's
Right.
dialogue, it wasn't edited out.
Well, there was, yeah, I'm glad you brought up the pizza ordering scene, because it's like what we know about pizza now.
Yeah.
That whole thing, which I was like, whoa, okay, maybe this is why. And then Posh had a pizza order, she had her exact things. And then I was like, isn't that exactly what David Beckham is? Like, I was like, holy crap. Like, and then I was like, wait, were they dating at the time? Or maybe they were just like talking. And
Well,
so
when
she
you go
wanted to kind
on,
of like shout him out without like outing it completely or something.
right.
So I thought that was so
So
interesting.
the number on the bus, on the Spice bus, is number 19. And the
Yeah.
production company is
I think it's just 19
it's
something.
19,
Studio
yeah.
19 or something like that.
Which kind of morphed into 19 Entertainment. But if you go to their website, I think it's like XIX or whatever. there's photos of Simon Fuller's like, portfolio. So he's got Spice Girls on there, and he's got like S Club 7, but he also had a picture of David Beckham. So I haven't done any deep research into that, but it just made me question, like, why would you have David Beckham's photo on your production website unless you were, affiliated with him more than just it's Victoria Beckham's husband. Anyway, so I wonder if there's a link.
Yeah, that is interesting because, like, as we know, sports and celebrities, like, we see it now with the Kardashians, like, so much. Like, it's either they're with a musician or a sports person, and there's so many celebrities like that. But yeah, I thought that was interesting part of that, and there was something else about it, and now I can't think of it. So, what were
Yeah,
you gonna say, Kris?
well, both of these movies break the fourth wall.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think that is interesting. And of course, today we are oversaturated with meta commentary. But back then, it was still a fresh, like, tongue-in-cheek sort of a thing to do, for Hollywood films at least. And so I thought that was interesting. But something that I wanted to bring up to Andy about Josie and the Pussycats was the TLC scene, and or sorry, not TLC, the TRL. Too many
Oh
letters.
yeah.
The TRL scene. Is he really a sleeper agent?
That's what I wonder. Or okay, so this is kind of what I thought, going back to like contractual relationships or whatever. So I wonder if, because now, like, in our community, in the stuff we talk about, there's like little memes going around like, oh, my agent, or the love hits different when your girlfriend's an agent or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, like, what if Carson Daly is an agent and his whole thing was just to destroy Tara Reid's career by like being like an abusive boyfriend or something to her? Because after she did this and like American Pie, she maybe did like a couple other things. Then she came out with this traveling show, and but like she kind of had like some drinking problems beforehand, and she had this weird traveling show on, I think it was E Network, and she was just it was terrible. And then they always went after her for like being anorexic or something, and I was like, I'm pretty sure she's just a drunk. But it was really sad just to watch everything kind of just dissolve for her. Because I did think she was entertaining. I thought she was kind of an interesting choice for this role, because she's supposed to be like, if you're putting it in like, because I was saying before we started recording, like, oh, they're redhead, a dark-haired one, and a blonde one. Well, she's supposed to be like the Bubbles, and supposed to be like kind of ditzy. So I was kind of like, I don't like, she seems a little bit more intelligent. Like, she doesn't really fit that super ditzy bill, like somebody like, like Anna Faris. She always does like ditzy girl. And so I was like, that's an interesting choice. But and then
Yeah, but
her
the
career just
ditzy
went down.
the ditzy one that they use, there's a couple different types of ditzy tropes, and the one that they use in Spice, or not Spice World, Josie and the Pussycats is the hippie, like the beach
Yeah.
bum type, the spiritual ditchy person. Like she acts ditchy, but then she'll spread out some like small wisdom. And then you're like, oh,
Yeah.
wait a second. Like, oh, maybe she's smart, you know? And
Right.
then, like, yeah, not only of the colors of the hair, but you're right. There is the whole like leader, strong leader, and then like the rebel one, right? Or
Right.
the ditzy um one. Like you have, well, it's just like the Ninja Turtles, right? Like the Ninja Turtles kind of fits that same motif. You have Leonardo the leader, and then you have Raphael, the
Yeah.
rebel, but then you have Michelangelo, the cowabunga dude. Then you had
Right.
Donatello, the smart one. So you have like, and then that kind of gets me into this idea of like, once you start, once the numbers of a group goes up, then a lot of times they start acting as like a pack mentality. And so I wonder if that's why they press a lot of like these groups, especially around that time, because it was easier to like, oh, let's get them together, and then they kind of will act kind of like a pack, kind of like DeJourn does at the beginning of the film, how they're all kind of bickering, like they're up on stage, or they perform when they get off the plane at the beginning, and they're all friends, but then when they get on the plane to travel, they're all fighting. They're like, "Oh, hey, he's doing my look. This is my look. He can't do this." Like a
That's my
sort
new
of,
look.
yeah. And they're fighting over it. So yeah, there is that. But to go back to the TRL thing really quick. Um, so Jen and anyone else who hasn't seen Josie and the Pussycats, they try to separate. There's that classic point of the story where they try to separate Josie to make her go solo and get rid of the other two, sort of thing. So they send Josie on to do an interview, and they have her listening to their with like her demo or whatever. And so she's being mind controlled by her own music, and so she's starting to act too big for her britches, sort of a thing. And meanwhile, they're like, oh, well, we also want to highlight you other two. So we got you a deal to go on TRL. And then they meet there, and the set's fake. And,
Right.
then, but the, it wasn't just him. Who was the other guy that was with them?
There was some guy, and he is like pretending to be Carson Daly, and
Yeah, it
and
was
then he
Carson.
comes out and he's like, well, it doesn't really work when I'm here or whatever. And then they have all these cardboard cutouts of like audience members who are also celebrities. And so that was a really weird part
Yeah, so you
too.
had the fake Carson Daly, then the real Carson Daly, but then um the real Carson Daly makes a comment like, "Oh, if I want to continue on this life, this rich and famous life path, I have to do what they say. I have to kill you now." And so he's they kind of allude to him being like possibly like a sleeper agent or something, and
Yeah.
so it's it's
Well,
it's
I
very
wonder
weird.
about that. Yeah, because now he's like on the Today Show. So they're like, oh, we're gonna bring him into, now you guys are adults. So we're gonna bring him into the adult realm. And then like that's kind of weird. But like, because him and Tara Reid were actually dating at the time that they're filming this movie. So then I'm like, okay, so they're alluding to that, but then also, is she like her career is sacrificed and like their relationship, maybe they had a real relationship, but that was also sacrificed so that he could go and be on the Today Show of all things. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that was weird. He was like, "Oh, I like you, but I have to kill you." I'm like, yeah, sorry.
right. Like, but
But
then
what
she probably, even during filming, she was probably like, wait a minute. Like later in her trailer, she's like, wait. I know how this actually works now.
Yeah.
And then it's also weird because Rachel Lee Cook didn't really do anything after, but then Rosario Dawson, she went on to do like Rent, and then she did a bunch of other things. So it was kind of interesting to think about like their career dynamics after they did this, even though that's not like, oh, this is the movie that I'm known for, you know, like, but they
Yeah.
still put them in this group together. So
And I was looking at Justin Timberlake's IMDb page the other day. And I looked at his 2 upcoming films, and one of them is a political intrigue about the guy that created the Gong Show and the Newlywed Game being a CIA informant. And then his other movie is called Reptile, and it's a political conspiracy movie. So I'm like, why is Justin Timberlake like doing all these like more like conspiracy, government conspiracy movies, like doing 2 back to back? Like, it's so weird. So
Wow. They're
it
really
is
going like
weird.
hard in the paint with like soft disclosures, you know?
yeah.
Crazy.
So let me look up my notes really quick and see what else we got. Is there anything on your guys' notes?
I do have a couple of things. Do you mind if we take like just a like 2-minute break? This was a green tea and I really have to go to the bathroom.
Oh
But
yeah, that's
I
fine.
could just pop out for a couple of minutes and you guys could vibe for a second and
Yeah, we can do that.
okay.
I'm gonna edit the beginning anyways when Jen had to leave and come back. So
Okay. All
yeah,
right. I'll be right back. So thank you.
Edited at the White House.
edited it at the. I should start parting that now. Like edited at the White House.
Yeah, I've never seen that before. So
Yeah, I didn't notice that. I usually pay attention to the credits of movies, but I was rushed with Spice World because I watched it last night after Flow State. I left Flow State early, and I was like, I'm gonna have to go watch Spice World. And so it was late, so I was just like, I just gotta watch it so it's in my mind for tomorrow. So I wasn't as like hyper focused on it because I didn't give myself enough like leisure time, sort of a thing. And so I didn't pay attention to the credits. So I'm glad that you did, because that I've never seen that in any other credit for any other movie. I'm
right?
going to have to see if there even is any. Like that.
Yeah. Like what
So
is up with
intrigued.
that? Is it only for like, movies out of the BBC or like what's up with that?
Maybe they put it underneath the YouTube description for the coronation. Edited at the White House.
Right. I can't remember, like I'm blurring a little bit of like what we discussed before we hit record. But I could just share the little tidbit that I found
Oh
that is
yeah.
because why would the Spice Girls sing other songs that are not their own music? as like a real, selling artist. So anyway, one of the songs was it was by Gary Glitter, and I'm the leader of the gang, from his album Just Fancy That. And he on that album is dressed like Elvis too, by the way.
What?
So turns out he had a cameo in the movie, which later got edited out because of controversy around the same time of him possessing child pornography. And it's right in this scene, which was very jarring. You weren't expecting it. Like, first of all, there's like a precursor to it where there's all these kind of Chippendale guys and they're topless and they're like oiled up. And the manager's like, no, don't have these guys, they're the Spice Girls, they don't need any guys. Like, and the producer guy's like, no, the guys have to be in there. And then it's like this discussion of, well, do something more original. So they're singing this song, Leader of the Gang, and the guys come out, and now they're in like suits, like purple suits that look like Elvis, like they've got the deep V. And then they turn around and their pants kind of get ripped off, and it just exposes like their butt cheeks. Anyway, so just like looking at it through this lens of the song that they're singing, they could be singing any Spice Girl song, but they're singing this Gary Glitter song, and he was in the movie, and he got busted for child pornography. And the Elvis flavor on top of it is just kind of interesting, considering we've been bringing that up.
Yeah.
I was really unexpecting that, but I was just like, all right.
Yeah, that is interesting. And that's also something I noticed in the Elvis movie, since we keep going back to that one as well. You know, all the Elvis songs from the movie, they would get like rappers to just like sample the song and then make a new song. And so and they would put the rap song in the movie. But then I realized the sample wasn't even a sample of Elvis's original recording. It was a sample of a cover. For instance, the famous single from that movie was that Doja Cat song, the "You Ain't Nothing But a Dog" song, and that sample, of course, comes from what's that Elvis song? The name of the song is slipping my mind at the moment.
Hound Dog.
Hound Dog, yeah. It's from that song, but it's not even Elvis singing it. It's this African lady in the movie. So they're saying
Did they have any like original Elvis songs? That makes me wonder if it was like a royalties situation.
Oh,
well, what gets weird is in the movie they explain this away as he was inspired by, because he would hang out with the African American side of town and those clubs back then, and so they explain it away as like, oh, all his songs was actually songs he heard being sung at these clubs, then he would record them, and then now he has the credit for them. For instance, the Hound Dog song, according to the movie, was from this African American lady at the club, and he was like, I like that song, I want to record it. So that gets us back to the kind of the masculine and the feminine, and gets us to this whole idea, which has been popular the last few years, of like the women behind the man sort of thing.
Yeah, I like. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, that you can go ahead. I was just going to say how weird that was.
Yeah. I like how you brought up the, how, because Eminem was kind of coming up around the time of these movies. So that was also kind of a thing where it was, or taking the predominantly African American Black type music and then making it white or having a white person on it. But then, hold on, I gotta find finding the note, sorry. So there's a whole thing with the product placement and specifically with Rosario Dawson's character. So they're going to, I think it's New York City or something. And they get to their hotel room and they're kind of all hanging out by themselves, like taking it all in. And she's watching behind the music, Captain and Tennille and the chief. And then the chief, he's the only Black member of that band. But then I noticed the product placement around her is tied with bleach and ivory soap. And I was like, oh, so are they like alluding to like they're kind of like whitewashing this woman out of, say that her character was a real person or whatever. Like, kind of how Michael Jackson, bleached his skin and everything, and LaToya, and I think there's probably other celebrities too that kind of lightened their skin, and they probably did it a lot more back in like the 50s and 60s to kind of fit more of a, from, I guess what I would say, what would be considered a more palatable look, marketing wise back then, even though I think it's completely insane. And, obviously we've kind of analyzed, throughout the truther community, the kind of mental health decline of Michael Jackson over the years being the prince of pop, right? So then he's got all this pressure on him and all this weird childhood trauma and stuff. So then, he has this dysmorphia like, oh, maybe people won't like me because, of my skin color and things like that. And I just thought that was such a weird product placement, and I wonder if they were trying to nod to that and like kind of disclose it a little bit more, or if it was a little bit more nefarious. Like, it really just brought up a lot of questions about that whole aspect of the whitewashed culture. So
Yeah. And something else, talking about the product placement also, I wondered, could they also have Target like as a product, like, oh, it's a Target exclusive, like you can get like Target exclusive music and like deluxe editions of their albums and stuff, and they have that whole thing in Josie and the Pussycats, and they have the Target symbol, and I'm just like, I wonder if that is alluding to like the target audience, like they're targeting the audience and things like that. Like I was like, that made me think of that. Then I'm glad you brought up Michael Jackson, because I just learned recently that Pharrell Williams, who produces a lot of music, he produced and wrote the majority of like basically the entirety of the Justin Timberlake's first solo album, Justified, but he originally wrote it for Michael Jackson, and Michael Jackson didn't want to record that album. So they had Justin Timberlake record the Justified album.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I mean, on the album, he's on Senorita and all that.
Yeah.
Which is weird also because so he obviously in the public spectrum, from what the narrative is, got pinned with child pornography and all that, and we're not, I'm not gonna say one way or the other because I don't know, I wasn't there, and I haven't like researched really deep into it. I kind of feel like it's a Fall Guy situation maybe, and Pharrell Williams has been tied to that kind of a thing, because he was also working with, more recently, like on the Happy video, he worked with a animator from Japan that was a known pedophile. So it's kind of funny how it's like, oh, if you refuse to do it, we're gonna turn around and pin something on you. And like, they don't even necessarily, like in Josie and the Pussycats, it was a lot about, well, they just drug overdose or a plane crash and stuff like that. They don't really even have to do that to, they could just take your livelihood away, which would be, for Michael Jackson, he clearly liked making music and liked dancing. And I just think, going back to Tara Reid, I think she really did like acting, and then take her career away.
Yeah.
And the death of something, once you're gone or your career isn't there, then they can, they only have you in a contract, say they, I think somebody else was talking about this too, but I can't remember who it was exactly. They get you in a contract and say, oh, we'll pay you this much for this many. And then they end up making way more, because they bought the little bit amount, but they had the money to market it and everything and brainwash people to buy it. So I think about this with like Van Gogh and how he died before he really sold anything. Well, now you see Van Gogh everywhere. Well, is that because it's good art? Well, it is, like, in my opinion, it's good art. I really like it. But is it really because it's good art? Because think of all the other artists that could be on things too. But it's mostly just Van Gogh and like Monet and, people that have already passed away that didn't have any heirs or anything, so they can make more money off of it.
Yeah, that goes back to the whole nostalgic thing and like ruining your childhood. I mean, as soon as Winnie the Pooh came into the public domain, they made a horror movie about it, right?
Yeah.
And all these other things. And also I think the documentary crew following them and kind of making it like, oh yeah, this is Spice World, and we were kind of retelling the Beatles story, but we're doing this meta thing. So is it a documentary? Is it not a documentary? Is it based on true events? Is it not? This kind of limbo area is what they do a lot in biopics in general. And I've noticed a lot recently, they're doing a lot of strange biopics.
Right.
They have the Tetris one, which is all about stealing Tetris from the Soviets in the Cold War. And then you had the BlackBerry one, the
Right.
BlackBerry phone. And the one that I think is probably the most humorous to me is Eva Longoria is making her directorial debut with Flaming Hot, a Cheetos biopic.
My God.
and we showed the cover on the last flow state without talking about it because the cover is I always forget the name of that painting, the pointing painting or
Oh, the creation of Adam?
the creation of Adam
Yeah.
painting, but it's the because in this narrative it was a janitor at Frito-Lay a Mexican janitor. I was like, what if we made Mexican hot flavors? So it's the janitor laying on a bed of Cheetos with his hand pointed out with his finger, right? And then you have like the hand of God coming down that's covered in Cheeto dust, touching him. Um, which plays back into on the Weaving Spiders, a while ago, Alan Marcus, made us watch the Dark Horse music video for Katy Perry, and during the Nexus point of that video, she eats the flaming hot Cheeto during the ritual. So there's all these, they're silly biopics, but even the Elvis biopic, and I was trying to explain this to someone. They asked me if biopics were accurate, and I go, well, they're more for entertainment. They're not a documentary, right? And that's why the Netflix is under file calling the Cleopatra show a documentary. It's not just a show where they happen to cast Cleopatra as an African actress. It's a documentary, so that it's alluding that it's somewhat factual. And biopic, it's autographical picture, but they take liberties because it's still wanting to be entertainment, right? It's first and foremost, it's entertainment. But you have all these weird biopics that are, again, in that liminal space, kind of breaking the fourth wall in their own way, just like the Spice World movie, and they're about silly things, they're about Tetris or they're about Cheetos or whatever. But you also see in there, especially you see it predominantly in the Tetris movie, they're talking about the Russians in the Cold War. Like, really? Like, they're using nostalgia to rewrite history. And this is something that I talk about quite often, is that the past is more mutable than the future or the present. Like, if you want to change the if you want to direct the future, you have to change the past. Every time you tell a story or you think of a memory, it changes ever so slightly.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that in these movies like the Spice World and Josie and the Pussycats. Kids today, wasn't wasn't alive in the 90s and early 2000s. So, when they watch them, they they they're not going to understand the atmosphere. All they're going to know is what the movie tells them. So what are they going to think about Spice Girls? Are they going to realize that they are or were a real group? Will they understand that Josie and the Pussycats, on the other hand, was a fictional group, right? I mean, it's like the whole Gorillaz thing. Like, Gorillaz is a band, but it's not a band, sort of a thing. So the entertainment lines are getting very blurred. So that is very, very interesting, and that may be connected actually with implants
Yeah.
Because
So
once you start getting things blurry, things start changing. You get into a transcendental state. You're more impressionable.
So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it brings up, you can have implanted memories, right? But then, now we used to have headphones. And so in Josie and the Pussycats, they have these 3 3D hearing. I'm not sure what the technology was supposed to be, but
But they're like
yeah,
the Twitch girl streamers because they have the cat ears. So they're
yeah.
the
So they
headphones
have
with the cat ears.
They totally have the cat ears. But now we have like AirPods, which are like, it's like right in your ear. So it's like, and things like that, which we've kind of had those for a little bit, but then they've just gotten kind of like more and more refined to your ear. And then, we get stories of people with actual implants. And there's been a few stories around, you know, going around. There's a few people with videos on this, and it makes me think of, she has Josie in the movie. First of all, they have these 3D headphones so you can hear everything, but also there's the subliminal track. And then she has this special CD that was made for her, and her manager, whatever his name is, Alan Cummings, wants her to listen to it, and that's her homework or whatever. So she's walking around, and this subliminal message in her specialized track is, you don't need anybody, just be
Josie is
alone.
awesome.
Yeah, you're the best. They're just leeching off of you, blah blah blah. Well, some people that claim to have these implants say that they have thoughts kind of like this, and they're like, I don't usually think like this. And there's been codes and things released kind of indicating that. So there's this whole alienation thing. We just went through this huge alienation program, which is also weird because alien nation, that's a whole other thing. And
They
then
had a little
another,
alien moment in the Spice Girls too. Sorry to interject that.
yes. And then even like, it's weird because their coats even kind of look like the manager's coat that they're,
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? But
Totally.
yeah, so we're going through that whole thing, and then they both have these scenes, which is why I also wanted to talk about not only the straw man or the scarecrow, but the Tin Man. So we kind of have this thing, and it also brings it back to like Austin Powers. So I noticed like the jet and the bus, the
Mhm.
jet from Austin Powers and the bus from Spice Girls were very similar. They both have this like 007 references, and which I thought was really interesting. But kind of like all 3 of those movies, and there's other movies like this too, where they have like these silver jumpsuits, where that's supposed to be like super futuristic. And people have said that like when they have encounters with like grays or like the green aliens or whatever, they have similar things. Or sometimes I think I've heard it attributed to also Pleiadians or something like
Yeah, I
that.
think it's connected to Mercury.
Yeah, and that's another thing. And Mercury, it's very shifty, right? But I thought, well, is that like a Tin Man thing? So I wanted to see, well, what is the meaning? What is really the symbolism with Tin Man? And what I had brought, one of the definitions I had brought up is somebody who has no heart, kind of like no soul really, or they don't really have any connection emotionally. And then the other definition I had that brought up was somebody who will do anything legal or illegal to make a sale. And I thought those two definitions were really interesting to pair with these silver jumpsuits and like the whole Mercury thing and where we are now as a society. Like, I also kind of thought of like AI and robots and like C3PO. And I also kind of thought about armor. Armor looks also like that, but in a different way. And then Full Metal Alchemist, where, you know, he doesn't have a body. He's just a soul entrapped in this empty shell, basically. And so I think part of the mind control programs that are kind of being rolled out to the masses through these different platforms and paradigms and things are to alienate us from each other and make us more like robots. So, and then we're more apt to relate to AI and things rather than each other. And, you know, I really see that with like emotional reactions to things. It's like you're not supposed to have emotions anymore, especially after this whole you know, lockdown and everything. So I was kind of wondering what you guys thought
Cindy, do you
about
want to go first?
Wow. Okay, well, just to like take it back a little bit to what you were saying about artists that get featured for things like
Yeah.
Van Gogh, you know, speculation, but it's my opinion that like any of these artists we see that are so popularized, I'd be willing to bet that they, you know, probably drank some blood or did something that was like, you know, part of the club that they earned that platform. Like I don't know, but Picasso's granddaughter is now like the curative artist director for this gold business, and they made these gold pendants of the, you know, statue that was in the Wiener House of that Hysteria statue. Anyway, so I
Oh,
just see now a lot of the popularized artists in a new light, and I'm like, okay, I think that there's something else to the story. There's more context that got a little bit erased as time went on. And that's kind of what Kris was talking about with will the people know today how the context of you know, yesteryear. And it's so fascinating. So Chance and I went to go see the new Mario movie, you know, which is like for kids. And so New Humans. And the previews that played before it were for like, you know, World War II. So it's like, let's make sure that the New Humans know our telling of World War II. And it even kind of touches on what you're talking about with maybe Justin Timberlake's new movies that he's doing
Yeah,
and all
yeah,
that.
yeah. The Mario movie it's such a beast. I'm so briefly I'll say again that the part 2 of our Mario discussion will be coming out soon on the King of Cups channel, where we focus in on the movie. Part 1, of course, is on the Nomad Podcast channel, and part 2 we go deep into the movie and and we really expose everything that movie had going on it. That movie had so much going on in that movie. It was fascinating. But yeah, this
But okay. Sorry,
Okay,
there's
go ahead,
another
Jen.
thing. This is another thing. You guys are talking about the Ditzy character. Sorry to just take a quick tangent, but the
No.
Ditzy character that they, cast and things, and big part of our lifetime, if you watched it, was like the Friends sitcom. And then going back and rewatching and listening to Phoebe's dialogue, and Phoebe was like the casted like ditzy one. And Joey a little bit. But Phoebe was questioning like a lot of mainstream, like assumed consensus storylines. But she was the one that was way out there. It's just like it really hits home if you ever like review some of those episodes. It's just like, okay, so they were selling it that even then, like, you don't want to be like Phoebe, like
Yeah.
I always liked her, even though I hate that show, but she was my favorite part.
Also, I don't know. Maybe a good question would be, was either you two interested in the Cheetah Girls? I know that was Disney. That was also a big
That
thing
was
back in the early 2000s, early mid 2000s.
that was totally my sister. She tried to start her own Cheetah Girls group. She was like 12 when that was out, so I had a lot of fun watching her try to make this girl group.
It was the same storyline
Yeah.
as these movies. It's like, oh, it's a group of girlfriends who sing together and they get discovered by a manager, and and everything. Like it's the same story of being a handled, I guess, and
Yeah.
Okay, then that
being
makes me want to ask the question with the Cheetos, and the cheetah and all that. What's up with the cheetah thing? Like I know there was that thing going around that like cheetah, I guess, is allegedly part cat, part dog.
Yeah, kind of like foxes are the same way, but they're um like more doggish looking than cat. But
also connected to like leprosy
oh yeah.
as well, because leprosy you kind of become like a cat. You kind of get that affection, and then it even has like leper in its name. Yeah, that was it was so the Cheetah Girls was so weird. You get Raven Simone was part of the Cheetah Girls, and she actually wasn't a part of the final movie. There was 3 movies in the Cheetah Girls trilogy, and she wasn't a part of the final movie. And she was fighting with some of the girls, so it was like they made it kind of real, right? They kind of made the whole like, oh, there's bickering amongst the the group into reality, with having the actors kind of play that out in real life, and then not have one star in the final movie of the trilogy, right? And it's Raven Simone, and at the time that was like the biggest name of the group, because it's the little girl from the Crosby Show, and That's So Raven at the time and all that. So it's like
Well, they
that.
totally did the whole alienation thing with her. Like, oh, well, she's going to be the star. And it's kind of funny because is it 1 or 2 of the girls were from that girl group 3LW? So it's like they already had a singing group. So it's like, why did they really need the Cheetah Girls? Like,
Yeah, yeah. Is there anything else in your guys' notice you wanted to talk about? Any um closing thoughts? I guess we'll be wrapping up now,
yeah.
Um,
heading towards the finish line.
I just wanted to just quickly kind of go back to what Andrea was saying about like the emotional kind of programming
Oh
that
yeah.
we get with stuff in our culture so much. And I really feel like we were taught how to react to things through what we were watching. So like with Friends, for example, it taught us to be kind of like dramatic and extreme in reacting to things, which is like maybe really not helpful, instead of showcasing a balanced way to do things. So I would say that probably applies to these movies also. It's just like really extreme like reactions of reality, like always attention for the camera, and like wouldn't it be great if there was maybe on the TV box projecting into our lives like more realness, which is maybe what we can find on YouTube, like real people
Yeah,
having
that
conversations and breathing together.
that's a good point. Also, uh, um, Andy and I was talking about this stuff the other day. In fact, today a little bit actually. Trash TV, otherwise known as
So
reality TV show. Um, so we was talking about it because my mom watches Vanderpump Rules, and she has for years, and I catch it here and there with her, and I love watching her reaction to it more. Like, it's funny because she gets so dramatic when she's watching it. It's fun that she's like, why are they doing that, right? But you know Annie and I was talking about it, like back when reality TV first hit, like no one knew it was scripted, and now that like pretty much everyone will go, oh, well, that's scripted, just like wrestling. Oh, that's scripted now. It's the same thing. It's just scripted. Well, as around the time that people started to realize it was scripted, social media became bigger, and so now you could follow these people on their social media pages, on their Instagrams and Twitters and whatever, and you have a sense of, oh, this is their personal social medias, so they're going to be themselves. But then when you go to their pages, they're still doing the whole drama role. They're still talking about whatever rumor it is on their reality TV show or whatever on their social medias. And the reason why they're doing that is because, actors will have contracts now where they have to post on their social medias like a poster or something of their upcoming project to like advertise it to their fans and followers. Well, they don't really have that for reality TV. So how they get you to watch is their social medias. They're always in character, so they're going to be talking about the drama because that's their advertisement to watch the show. So like, oh, well, I want more of that tea, sort of a thing, right? And it's so they're always on, they're always in character. So that goes back to this whole like blurring the lines, breaking the fourth wall, not really telling you if is it a biopic, is it a documentary, is it real life, is it a movie, is it a real band, or is it from a comic book? Like all these kind of in between areas that we're talking about, which what it's a substance that is kind of that is the in between area, that's Mercury. And both these movies were made on the as we were mentioning, on the opposite ends of the Y2K. And, you know, Mercury, in my work with Gabe, we talk about Mercury being highly popular in like like the latter half of the 90s to the early 2000s. Mercury was literally everywhere in the entertainment industry, in our TV shows, and fashion, and just everywhere you could see that Mercury symbolism. So there's that again as well.
I kind of like while you're talking about, you know, oh, is it a biopic? Is it real life? And I kind of am thinking like, you know, even in while you're researching somebody or something, you know, you're like, oh, was that their real name? Because it turns out like Tom Cruise has some weird fancy name that I
Oh
never
yeah,
knew about. And I just had found out about all these. I was like,
yeah.
what? It was like,
That might have been me. I sent that video of the
I
guy
think
going
it
through all
was
these
you.
all these famous people's names, and like some of them
Yeah.
I knew, some of them I didn't. I was like,
Yeah.
wait, what? That's his stage name? I was like, there's so many people that use stage name, more than I realized. I didn't think it's. I had it in my mind that stage names was kind of in the past,
Right.
like, but no, it's still practiced today.
Right. And like how many people throughout history are like that? Like is Plato, was that his name? Or
Right.
was Nostradamus, was that his name? And were they just
They make
trying to
believe.
keep their anonymity and so that they could have like their actual private life or their Hannah Montana of everything?
Yeah,
They could have the
pseudonym.
best of both worlds. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, you know, like William Shakespeare, they say like, was
Or
that really
Mark
a
Twain.
guy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah,
That's a good point that ties it back into like the straw man, tin man thing. Yeah.
Right. I
I wonder
think,
if
yeah.
they do that because of like the numerological factor. It's like, here's your new name. It's got this
right.
number magic to it.
Well, and at what point is like a mask a benefit and a mask like being sneaky? There's like that kind of mercurial thing about masks. Like sometimes you need ones to like, you know, get a,
Yeah.
get away from bad guys or something. And
Yeah.
sometimes you're the bad guy just in disguise. Like,
I kind of want to do an episode, possibly, here's a teaser, Over the Mask with Jim Carrey,
Mm,
because I think
cool.
that I think there's a lot that we can discuss there.
Yeah.
yeah.
Because, you know, Jim Carrey would sit in front of the mirror and distort his face, and he had like this, he as and those other people that have said this, um there he had this case of like, when he looked in the mirror, he didn't recognize himself. So that's why he was doing all these faces. He was trying to make a face that he would recognize. And he got really good at distorting his facial muscles and moving them.
Hmm.
So it's like he didn't even recognize himself in the mirror. So what is he possessed with? You know?
Right.
And I mean, he is a a whistleblower. You know, he says all these crazy things in interviews and things. So like, what's going on there?
Right.
Like, what mask is he wearing?
I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
You
But
kind of
yeah.
like how Josie and the Pussycats is just like, this is what we're doing. We're just gonna tell you, but we're gonna make it into a dumb movie. Like, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And
It's
it had that cynical attitude like the Brady Bunch movies had, as the Scooby-Doo live action movies had. Like that cynical kind of attitude. Like it's funny. Like it was
Right.
funny
Yeah.
back then, but like if it was looking back at it, it was very very cynical in a way. Like
Right.
it was kind of talking down to like these conspiracy ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing that was really telling to me that I just have to bring up is there's a scene where they're unveiling the like she's sitting down with her friend that's not part of the group, but she's also from Riverdale. And so Josie's sitting down and she's like trying to figure out what I don't know, what is that called, like a channel, I think, on the mixer when they're putting the track together.
Yeah,
And
the
so the
frequencies.
channel, yeah, the channel that the subliminal message is on is 27. And then like a scene or two later, one of the messages was Heath Ledger is the new Matt Damon. And then they had also had Matt Damon like be Tara Reid's new boyfriend as his cardboard cutout in an earlier scene. And I was like, what is going on there? Because
Wow.
I was like, that's totally right before, you know, a little bit before that happened. I was like, that could be something going on there. I'm not gonna say one way or another because I don't
Like,
know for sure, but
yeah, I mean, we don't know for sure, but it's like seems to be pretty clear that like Matt Damon is the star boy of like the Hollywood club. He's even in that World War II movie that was the trailer before
yeah.
Mario
So it's
movie.
like we were talking about, the king isn't really the king or whatever, and he's just like being a fall guy because of the eclipse or whatever. So then I was like, is that like kind of what is going on with Heath Ledger or something? Because I liked him way better, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Did you mean to
Yeah.
say the fall guy because of the eclipse because of Jesus being crucified on an eclipse?
Maybe.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Also the
No, I didn't even think of that.
that is a good
Go
point,
ahead,
but
Chris.
also the coronations. Some of us has been doing research into the coronation. Just
I heard recently
just for
that
fun.
because I was like, why did they wait so long? You know,
Yeah.
I felt like it was like weird that they waited so long.
Yeah. And I thought it was supposed to be in June. For like the longest time, it
Huh.
was like 6/3. And then all of a sudden somebody's like, no, it's this weekend. I was like, since when?
It was like, okay, so it's like around the eclipse. And then
Yeah.
I thought that was it. Like, that's enough. Like, you know, Moon and Scorpio, of course, they're gonna do it in that time. But I heard recently, and I don't know the number, but it was like such and such amount of days, but the days was like, you know, 666. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like days between when Queen Elizabeth died and then the coronation.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Jen, because the thing that stuck out to me most with the coronation was the New York Times ran an article about the Grim Reaper in the shadows, you know, the Verge or whatever they claim it to be. And within the article, they interview some people, and they're saying that they have prophetic visions prior to the coronation of the crown falling from the king's head,
Wow.
and and they so they're alluding to like, oh, you know, some psychic phenomenon, like prophecy happening, but and then they have the Grim Reaper show up, and all the tabloids run that story. So you do have, and now what you're saying with like the 666 days, and I came, it made me think of like manufacture prophecies, like like constructed prophecies.
Like Mother Shipton, like those are supposed to be constructed ones.
Yeah, so like, oh, well, you're saying all these signs, but yeah, you're seeing all these signs because you're putting the signs in front of you. So of course you're seeing the signs of the end of times, because we want you to think that it's always about to be the end of times.
Right. Do you
sort
guys
of thing.
remember Y2K? Sorry to bring this up again, but like, do you remember what was your personal like experience at that time? Like, what was Y2K to you guys?
I was like, I don't have a computer, so why do I care?
Let's see, how was I in Y2K? So I would have been around 3 years old, so like I was small. So
Oh, sorry.
yeah,
you're so fresh.
I'm so fresh. I would
You're so
have.
brand new, Kris.
I'm so brand new. I have memories of being younger, but like I don't really have any memories of people being like, oh, it's Y2K, it's the end of times. I remember hearing about it afterwards once in 2000 when the No Strings Attached album came out for NSYNC, and they started singing about these prophecies, and I was like, what are these people singing about?
Yeah. I mean, okay, for me it was like, I feel like it was a good music time. Like there was the Millennium album, like that was great.
There was Smash Mouth.
It was
It was
great.
great.
And then Y2K happened and I was really confused about like what it was exactly, but then I got a computer right after that and that was great.
Right. Maybe it was just to make everybody think that they needed one.
Do you think?
Like make everybody think they're important.
Yeah.
But remember, everybody was obsessed with making a time capsule?
Yeah.
I just thought of this. I think,
No.
did I send that to you, Kris, where somebody put a bag of flaming hot Cheetos in a sarcophagus?
Yeah, see, and that's the thing. We we as a society have never had like really physical way to like go back in time as we do now with computers and the internet. And you could kind of do that with movies and everything, but like
That's why you guys got a journal. You got a journal for the future.
How do you know that your journal isn't changing through time like a Mandela effect?
Right. I really feel like journaling is the way to communicate to your future self.
Maybe.
The more you write stuff down, the more you open up portals to like connect with your future self. Because the journal you're writing like will transcend time. So
maybe.
Keep this perspective of now.
And that's what the Notebook was about, right? Isn't that what the Notebook was about?
Timeline, but I might die. Like this body might die, but the journal will still be here. And then, future Jen. Anyway, I have a whole noodle about it, but
yeah. No, I like that. That's a really good point. I've talked about, we have this trend of wanting to like, oh, I was cringy when I was young. I had a cringy goth phase, or I was cringy because I liked NSYNC. Like, of course, everyone liked NSYNC or the Backstreet Boys back then. So,
Or Bloodhound
don't
Gang.
be embarrassed. Yeah. So
hey, you know what? They had good mathematical. I'm just gonna say it. They had good mathematical music juju in those songs, and a lot of popular mainstream music. Hate to say it, but it's there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And exactly. And I talk about, don't kind of look down on your past selves about, having a cringy area or whatever. Like, honor the wisdom that you gather during those phases. Like, one of the things that I mentioned is in high school, I was really into surf culture, even though I live in the Midwest and never been surfing. But I
Do you
would
listen
follow
to the
all
Beach
these
Boys?
surfers and watch all these surfers movies and documentaries, and I would follow like the WSL and listen to these interviews, and like I was so immersed and encapsulated by this culture. And one of the things that stuck with me, and yeah, I was kind of a shooby wannabe surfer bro because I would wear the board shorts, which I still love board shorts. They're so comfy. I still wear board shorts. They're so comfy. And then like the hemp hoodie, and it had like the
Oh,
teardrop
the
mush,
drug rug? The
the
old
drug.
drug rug?
Like, I was like, I was fully. I had to skate the Justin Bieber skeeter here. Um, like I said, the mushroom necklace. Like I had the full shebang, um, hemp thing going on, and, and I could say, yeah, oh, I was cringy then, right? Or I can say, hey, listening to all those surfers, I learned about how their philosophy about balance and being out on the water and learning the ways of the water, the true ways of water, not the James Cameron way, but like the true ways of water and living in that element and everything. And um, I don't know if it was my Cancer in me, but that or my water sign, but that really stuck out to me. And so instead of saying that I was a cringy wannabe surfer, I go, I learned something from that era, right? And so I think the journaling that you're talking about to talk to your future self is very similar to that. It's like you can still communicate with your not just your past lives. People want to um, get hypnotized and try to communicate with their past lives and get regressed and all that. But you can also talk to your younger self, and um, I think there's that element of it too.
Yeah, that's a whole other life. It feels like a different life sometimes.
Yeah.
That's why I'm wearing all this shit.
I know, right? I mean, there was a bit of me that got kind of excited that the stuff from my childhood was coming back. I
Yeah.
really appreciate the lens of seeing it as a kind of operation though, so that, I can kind of see both things at the same time instead of being like full-heartedly like, yes, let's go backwards, and like I love all that stuff from my childhood and there's such good memories. But so that's helpful.
Yeah.
And if you watch something enough, our human nature is to be like entrained to it, right? So you kind of life imitates art in a way. But surfing, that's awesome. Like there's so many good life skills in that about like being decisive and not having fear and feeling full body awareness. Like you can't
Yeah.
Going with the
wave any
flow.
fear.
Going with the flow. Again, and all your surfers are depicted as like, like even in oh, Point Break, Pat not Patrick Stewart, Patrick Swayze was kind of like that surfer bro, like kind of character, right? So you know that is very much a trend of like making the person that kind of may have wisdom kind of seem a bit silly. I mean, that goes back to the whole fool card in the tarot, and playing the part of the fool. Of course. Yeah. So out of everything that we talked about today, is there any final words you would want to kind of possibly leave the audience about all this stuff that we're talking about? That I know our conversation kind of went a little bit everywhere, which is fine. It's all part of the weave. Also, I'll, since it popped into my head really quick, last night's flow state, I forget what number it was, but in it, Ben does his Mojo Jojo impression.
Yes.
Yay.
So if you want to see Ben do his Mojo Jojo impression, there's that flow state to go back and rewatch. So it's ruining that you're wearing a Powerpuff Girl shirt now because he did that last night on the fly. It was so
channeling Ben.
Yeah. Any last words, ladies?
I did promise on a weave that I would unveil my Mandela effect that I found in the Spice Girls, so I do have to unveil that now.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So, they're making fun of Posh Spice, and it's Sporty Spice talking. She's like, "Oh, it must be so hard for you. Should I wear the little Gucci dress, or the little Gucci dress?" And when I was a kid, I've watched this many times. It was this or Grease. Those were the two movies I was gonna watch when I got home from school. And so I've watched it a lot of times as a kid. So I knew that was not the line, and it used to be the little black dress. So that was interesting to me. I was like, that's not how it goes. But yeah, as far as final thoughts, I would say if you are into kind of these mind control projects and you want to kind of see how they're played out in the Hollywood realm, definitely watch both of these movies to get kind of a different perspective. If you just want to have a girly movie night, also watch these movies.
Yeah, and the spice melange of the spice world.
Yes.
Mm.
Also, embrace the cringe.
Yeah.
Any last words, Jen?
Oh, well, I just really wanted to thank you guys. I mean, I love any opportunity to chat the deep woo about stuff. And you guys are so eloquent and lovely. And so sorry for taking things here and there, but I had a lot
No,
of fun.
it's fine. That's how we roll. That's how, yeah.
So
And much love to Rachel and Janie who ended up not making it, but much love to them. I know they would have loved to be here. Sorry, did I interrupt you, Jen, by accident?
no, you're good. Love
Yes,
you guys.
and thank you both for coming and hanging out with me, and thank you, Kris, for hosting. I guess
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's like classic me. I'm like, oh, I forget to thank people, and then I'm like, oh crap.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, if there was anything you guys wanted to promote that you guys are currently doing, I would try to let the people promote anything at the end really quick.
All right. I'm not really working on anything right now, but in the future I will. If you do want to follow me outside of YouTube, well, you can. I don't know if you can get to my YouTube through my Instagram, but my Instagram is the same as my name shows on here. So if you search that, you'll find me.
Yeah.
I'm not prepared.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's fine.
Yeah, I have a private Instagram account, so I'm just here for the chat. It's fine.
Yeah.
You should definitely
That's
follow Kris, and you should follow Andy. So and
yeah.
the spark, you know. Hit
Yeah.
them.
Follow everyone.
I'll be in the chat.
Be in the
Right.
chat.
Yep.
Is there a B in the chat? I know. B in the chat. I know. Okay. Anyways, thank you everyone for watching this episode. Again, happy birthday to Andy.
Thank
For
you.
suggesting this.
Happy birthday
I-
to Jen too, because hers is somewhere around here. I don't know when.
And I had actually never seen either of these two movies. They both flew under my radar. It wasn't really my cup of tea. I mean, I am a guy, and I was fairly young at the time, so obviously, like, these movies wouldn't stick out to me. I mean, I had heard of them before, but I had never come back and watched them. I'm glad I did, because I love even just at a production standpoint, I love the early 2000s, late 90s way of editing. I really kind of, speaking of nostalgia, I have somewhat of a nostalgic um I'm missing that. And that also goes back to I really like crossfading transition, and no one does crossfading anymore. I'm like, why don't people use crossfade? It's such a cool transition. It used to be used all the time in film. Like it was so easy, and now it's just like one thing after the other. There's no like
Well,
sometimes.
sorry, I hate to bring up something else, but just because you
Oh,
brought
no,
it
yeah, go ahead.
don't you guys find it interesting that, like, remember when, like, TV magic was like the magic of television, it'd be like you'd hold a thing and it'd be like, now it's gone. And that's exactly what people are doing right now, like on TikTok. Like, it's this new technology of like transitions, but it's like, no, people used to do that a lot, and then it got kind of overdone, and then it was like, then there was special effects and yada yada yada. But anyway, I just think that that's cute.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just like a lot of the effects you can do. You can, like the Hollywood effects, you can pretty much do all that at home right now. So it goes back to the whole like bedroom producer thing I mentioned earlier. Now we can do this at home, but like quality over quantity,
Yeah, totally.
sort of a
Right.
thing. Not saying that all big studios should be the only people to produce music, but also there's something about putting in the effort to get a studio and get that equipment that adds to the music because you worked for it. I feel like, rather than just, oh, I torrented this thing of Fruity Loop Studios, FL Studios, and made this hip hop beat, this trap beat, and I'm gonna do some sad boy music over it. Like, of course you're gonna use sad boy music over it because you didn't do anything. You just sat in your room and did it all. Anyways, yeah, rant over. Thank you, everyone. This is such a great conversation. And more Kingdom Cups to come, more deep drive-ins to come, and other segments that coming up with. Much love. of Cups.